And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Welcome to Benchley Night. This is the first Benchley Night in a while. I've been off in Texas, painting at Plein Air, Texas, and then I went up to Montana and did sketching and photographing things up in Montana because I've got a show coming up next fall at a gallery in Bozeman, Montana. Learned a lot about Montana, ladies and gentlemen. Learned a lot about Montana. But now I am home, and there are all kinds of interesting things going on with Faceplant because they used to use an entity called Network for Good. And Network for Good processed liberal snowplowing do-gooder donations. And Faceplant did not take any commission on it. Now they're taking a commission. They're no longer using Network for Good. They're now using Network for Evil. But I don't know. I don't know what kind of system there will be for the liberal snowplowing do-gooders. And that is one of the reasons why I didn't have a beneficiary this week. Also this week, human beings are nuts, ladies and gentlemen. Human beings are nuts. Between the misery that humans inflict on one another and everyone claiming to be the righteous ones, so sad. And then seeing in the newspapers that in 5 crucial swing states, the yam holds a lead. What are people thinking, ladies and gentlemen? Are people completely crazy? I don't get it. I don't get it. So therefore, we are going to read a little Robert Benchley, and we're not going to worry about all the problems of the world. The unidentified unglet in the can is just going to say hello. And we'll be back next week. We'll be asking for money one way or another once we figure out how to do it in this brave new world. Traveling in Peace by Robert Benchley. The uncommercial traveler and his problems. Even in an off year, the conversational voltage is very high on the transatlantic Greyhounds, ocean liners. There is something in the sea air which seems to bring a sort of kelp to the surface, even in the most reticent of passengers. And before the ship has passed Fire Island, you will have heard as much dull talk as you normally would get at a dozen Kiwanis meetings at home. And the chances are that you yourself will have done nothing you can be particularly proud of as a raconteur. They tell me that there is something that comes up from the bilge, which makes people like that on shipboard. I myself solved the problem of shipboard conversation by traveling alone and pretending to be a deaf mute. I recommend this ruse to other irritable souls. There's no sense in trying to affect it if you have the family along. There's no sense in trying to affect anything if you have the family along. But there is something about a family man which seems to attract prospective talkers. Either the little woman scrapes up acquaintances who have to have their chairs moved next to yours and tell you all about how rainy it was all spring in East Orange, or the children stop people on the deck and drag them up to you to have you show them how to make 4 squares out of 6 matches. And once you've established those contacts, you might as well stay in your stateroom for the rest of the voyage. Once you are alone, you can then start in on the deaf mute game. When you go down to dinner, write out your order to the steward And pretty soon the rest of the people at your table will catch on to the fact that something is wrong. You can do a few pleasant passes of sign language if the thing seems to be going over too slowly. As a matter of fact, once you've taken your seat without remarking on the condition of the ocean to your right-hand neighbor, you will have established yourself as sufficiently queer to be known as that man at our table who can't talk. Then you'll probably be left severely alone. Once you're out on deck, stand against the rail and look off into the horizon. This is an invitation which few ocean talkers can resist. Once they see anyone who looks as if he wanted to be alone, they immediately are raring to go. One of them will come up to you and look at the horizon with you for a minute, and then will say, "Isn't that a porpoise off there?" If you're not very careful, you will slip and you will say, "Where?" That is fatal. What you should do is turn and smile very sweetly and nod your head as if to say, "Don't waste your time, neighbor. I can't hear a word you say." Of course, there's no porpoise, and the man never thought there was, so he'll immediately drop that subject and ask you if you're deaf. Here is where you may pull another bone. You may answer, "Yes, very." That will get you nowhere. For if he thinks he can make you hear by shouting, he will shout. It doesn't make any difference to him that what he has to do is engage. It doesn't make any difference to him what he has to do to engage you in conversation. He will do it. He would spell out words to you with alphabet blocks if he thought he could get you to pay any attention to his story of why he left Dallas and what he is going to do when he gets to Paris. So keep your wits about you and be just the deafest person who ever stepped foot onto a ship. Pretty soon, he'll get discouraged and will pass on to the next person he sees leaning over the rail. And he will ask that person, "Isn't that a porpoise over there?" You will hear the poor sucker say, "Where?" And then the dam will break. And as they walk off together, you will hear them telling each other how many miles they get to a gallon and checking up on the comparative sizes of the big department stores in their respective towns. After a tour of the smoking room and writing room, making deaf and dumb signs to the various stewards, you'll have pretty well advertised yourself as a hopeless prospect conversationally. You may then do very much as you like. Perhaps not quite as you like. There may be one or two slight disadvantages to this plan. There may be one or two people on board to whom you want to speak. Suppose, for instance, that you're sitting at one of those chummy writing desks when you look right into the eyes of the person using the other half. And suppose that those eyes turn out to be something elegant, something very elegant indeed. What price being dumb then? Your first inclination, of course, is to lean across the top of the desk and say, "I beg your pardon, but is this your pen that I am using?" Now, here's the picture. Mr. John Wilhelm in Omaha, Nebraska, sent this picture along once he learned that this is what we'll be reading tonight. But here is our protagonist and the pair of very elegant eyes that he's looking at. Your first inclination, of course, is to lean across the top of the desk and say, "I beg your pardon, but is this your pen that I am using?" Or even more exciting, "I beg your pardon, but is this your letter that I am writing?" Having been posing as a deaf mute up until now, this recourse is denied you, and you'll have to use some other artifice. There's always the old Roman method of writing notes. If you decide on this, just scribble out on the following on a bit of the ship's stationery. I may be deaf and I may be dumb, but if you think that makes any difference in the long run, you're crazy. This is sure to attract the lady's attention and to give her some indication that you're favorably impressed with her. She may write a note back to you. She may even write a note to the management of the steamship line. Another good another good way to call yourself to her attention would be to upset the writing desk. In the general laughter and confusion which would follow, you could grab her and carry her up on deck, where you could tell her confidentially that you really were not deaf and dumb, but that you were just pretending to be that way in order to avoid talking to other passengers who did not interest you. The fact that you were talking to her, you could point out, was a sure sign that she, alone amongst all the people on the ship, did interest you in a rather pretty compliment to her. You could then say that, as it was essential that none of the other passengers should know that you could talk, it would be necessary for her to hold conversations with you clandestinely up on the boat deck, or better yet, in one of the boats. The excitement of this would be sure to appeal to her, and you'd unquestionably become fast friends. There's one other method by which you could catch her favor as you sat looking at her over the top of the desk, a method which is the right of every man, whether he be deaf, dumb, or bow-legged. You might wink one eye very slowly at her. It wouldn't be long then before you could tell whether or not it would be worth your while to talk. However it worked out, you would have had a comparatively peaceful voyage. All right, ladies and gentlemen, all right. That brings us to the end of Benchley Night tonight. It's a very brief Benchley Night. It is still, it's 7:58. I mean, it is less than 15 minutes of great American humor, but we are gearing up for, I think next week is either going to be Back to the Game or possibly Opera Synopses. Opera Synopses, the hands down, the finest Robert Benchley essay ever. So you take good care. I'll figure out how to raise money with the unidentified unglet in the can, dealing with Mr. Zuckerberg's new shenanigans. And you take good care. We'll see you next week. And don't let the insanity of human beings bring you down. All right, take good care. Bye-bye.